Thoughts have been circling in my mind since I started making these videos about writing success and luck. And it's not simply because I worked for a very long time and eventually got a book deal, which naturally involves some reflection after the fact. When the initial elation starts to subside, you begin to ask yourself, well, how lucky was I? Versus, how well did my work really stand out? Obviously, there's always a degree of luck involved when it comes to any kind of agreement in publishing. Skill alone isn't enough. I've always believed that, and I can't imagine my opinion on that ever changing. Luck will always be a factor. You can control your own writing, but when it comes to convincing someone else that your writing is marketable and that other people will want to read it, you can never fully gauge that. So luck, for want of a better word, is always part of that equation. But there's another form of luck that I think played an important role in me landing my book deal. Something I'm very conscious of, and something I think is going to be an increasingly difficult factor for people who are up and coming in the industry, particularly when it comes to getting their debut out there. It involves timing in the sense that there is, I fear, a narrowing window of opportunity that writers into the future are going to struggle with, and specifically debut authors. This isn't an issue that I think is going to affect established authors in quite the same way. And I care about that. The book ecosystem today is not as healthy as it was in decades past. And as both a reader and an aspiring writer, anything that could be harmful to that ecosystem should be discussed and analysed. I do think about people younger than me who have a whole world of distractions outside of writing, but who still choose to lean into writing as something worthy of their time and worthy of pursuit. The issue, incidentally, comes from that very same source of distraction: technology. AI adoption is already making entry-level jobs around the world at this point very difficult for young people. And I can't help but reflect that one of the ways in which I have gotten lucky is that I managed to get someone on board with my novel right at the cusp of when this big wave of AI slop started coming in. I remember that around the same time I was submitting my novel last year, I was also submitting a lot of short stories. Interestingly, with the short story submissions, even more so than when I was submitting my novel, I saw a lot more in terms of disclaimers. You'd often have to agree via a tick box on the submission form that AI had not been used in the production of the piece. So even early 2025, AI was being considered in that submission process. And unfortunately, what I've heard since isn't too surprising. These simple disclaimers have not been an effective barrier for people submitting AI-generated work. And importantly, AI-generated queries. I've read in several places now that publishers and journals are inundated with queries that they suspect to be AI generated. And I really can't express how much of a waste of time that is, both for you as a writer and the people receiving those submissions. It just muddies the water for everyone and creates enormous frustration. This should be needless to say, but if you haven't taken the time to write your query properly, they're going to know. And worse than that, it clutters the system for everyone else. It makes getting your work seen, regardless of who you are, far more difficult. It's a negative-sum game. Everyone is worse off. The reason I'm particularly concerned with budding authors and people just starting out is that if you've already built a name for yourself, you've effectively proven that you're not a machine. You're not just someone feeding prompts into an AI and churning out a book to make a quick buck. But for new writers, it burdens their chances before they even get a chance to evidence how hard they worked on their writing or how fit for the market they feel their work really is. And right now, it genuinely feels like there's a kind of race underway. If you can get published in the next few years, you might be able to outrun AI's rising tide. And I use the word tide very deliberately here because I do think it's going to get worse as time goes on. The tide is coming in, and unfortunately, it will eventually wash a lot of good work out with it. The reason I've been thinking about this recently is because there was an article in the Bookseller mentioning that literary agents are adding more amendments to their submission guidelines, specifically urging authors in more express terms not to use AI. So it's become a big enough problem that the industry is actively talking about it. After I wrote the initial script for this video, some of you may have heard of the Serpent in the Grove fiasco of recent weeks, where the prize-winning poet is suspected of having used AI to produce that work. But at this point in time, there's still a lot of speculation and uncertainty, and most of the conversation is focusing more on the implications into the future. That it's going to one day be impossible to know if writing is art or an imitation of art. And I'm being careful with my words there rather than saying human-made or machine-generated, because I will die on the hill that art is a form of expression. Machines cannot feel and then express from those feelings emotions. Their output is merely an imitation of feeling, so In my mind, there are no circumstances under which anything they produce can be considered art. But maybe that's a thought for another video. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have the answers to how you can really stand out against something that's AI generated, except that even into the future, when I'm going to be pitching my future work, as published authors still have to, I will stick to the advice that has always served best and that I still read everywhere. That the best chance you have to get your work read and appreciated is polish your query, polish your story, and make sure both stand out right from the beginning, right from the very first sentence. If you can do that, at least for now, you'll be able to prove that you're not just a machine.